Mexican wonderkin Gilberto Mora will likely never play a minute for FC Barcelona. But the very real links to him this week are sparking a really interesting debate about investing in young talents outside the club and the hard line that Barcelona probably shouldn't ever invest in midfielders. And if Barcelona never invested in outside midfielders, well, then we never would have got Pedri. But with that, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself because welcome to episode 734 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton. It is the international break, so I'm dipping my toe in a little bit of extra stuff. And I've never really had the opportunity to talk about Mexican football here, so that's kind of the focus of today's show through the lens of Gilberto Mora and comparing him to La Masia and different things that are going on around the club. And at the end, we're going to touch on a little bit of the other transfer stuff about potentially Lewandowski's future. But again, we're going to get to all of that. First things first, we have to talk about the hype surrounding Gilberto Mora and why I'm dedicating an entire video to him the way I did at the Young a few weeks ago. Because again, this kid is for real, and these links are for real, and the links of Real Madrid and all that stuff are also for real. And please take a sec to subscribe to the YouTube channel, give a like, give a comment, help me out on the podcast apps, or get these shows without the ads on Patreon for as low as $3. All right, time for Gilberto Mora. Vamos. Mora turned 17 today as I'm recording this on Tuesday, October the 14th. So yes, he is 17 today, which means that he is still 1 year away from potentially moving to Europe, where he would then occupy a non-EU spot on any squad list that he is on. And at the moment, it seems that there is a huge arms race for him, drumming up enough interest. Of course, this is what a good agent is going to do by almost every major club in Europe. I've been scouring and I've seen links with Barcelona, Real Madrid, Ajax, Man City, AC Milan, Inter Milan, and Arsenal all expressing interest, and you know that others will join the fray. There's also an interesting link to Inter Miami. And the reason I say interesting is because that could be the best of the bunch as a springboard for him to then make a move to Europe. Very much like it was for Thiago Almada as he got things going at Atlanta United and then turned that into a move to Europe. But unlike Almeida, who was kind of the guy for Atlanta United, there is a very, very, very good chance, or maybe at least a slight chance, that Mora would be playing with Messi next season in MLS, at least for 1 year. The Tijuana midfielder bust on the scene last season when he was the youngest goal scorer in Liga MX's history, and he has followed that up this season with 5 goals and 1 assist in 761 minutes for the Cholos. Those stats aren't the point, though, because it is all about the eye test with him. Truly, the eye test is why we're here, because of the comparisons that watching him in, now I'll say extended time. People know that I do some work with MLS, so I did see him in the MLS All-Star game. I watched him in Leagues Cup, and I've actually watched a good bit of this kid. And yeah, as much as I want to say, hey, let's temper our expectations, especially for Mexican fans who could not give more hope to finding the next great Mexican hope, well, he is the real deal, at least at this point in his progression for, as we're saying, a 16 and 17-year-old kid. I'll say up front, yes, he looks to me like Pedri, but not this version of Pedri. It is a comparison that I would make to the 16-year-old Pedri at Las Palmas. That is where the comparisons come, not only in the eye test, but also where he plays on the field and some of the things that you can see starting to click. Will they all click the way they did with Pedri? Because that's what Gilberto Mora is going to have to do to continue that comparison to Pedri. Everything is going to have to click because Pedri is one of the greatest midfielders the world has at the moment. Starting the positions, Mora plays all over the field. He plays as a false winger, as an attacking midfielder mainly, but it can occasionally drop in to receive and build up from a deeper position. Yes, he is left-footed, so that is unlike Pedri, but his right foot isn't too shabby either. The best midfielders in world football can use both feet at a high level. He does get bullied off the ball sometimes, which is expected of a 16-year-old, but I already like the way he uses his low center of gravity to get fouled, just as a younger Pedri did. Most importantly, the two things I really like about his game is one, his ability to accelerate past defenders in close spaces. He's got those little spins, a slight push of the ball, and then he's off to the races. And two, it's the high-level decision-making in traffic that are already a part of his game. And for those who've been watching for a while, especially my youth content on La Masia, the one thing that I say that sticks out to me more than anything else is how quickly do young players make decisions? Because a lot of the times that stuff cannot be learned. Maybe someone like Frankie de Jong did learn it over time in his mid-20s. But again, for young players coming up from the academy that are entrusted into the midfield of Barcelona, like Pedri, like Gabi, that stuff is all instinctual. And the reason why Culés right now are so excited about those comparisons to Pedri are not that Mora will someday replace Pedri, but that he would be a perfect left-footed complement to Pedri with his right foot on the right. And the reason why I bring him up with Masia having all those other good talents, and we'll get that conversation in a second, is that he has so much of a sample size against professionals already at his ripe old age of turning 17 today. 1.5 seasons in Liga MX and 2 World Cups already between the U20 and then the U17 this month, where he was clearly one of the best players in the tournament. So he is excelling not only against players his own age, but he's also having a lot of really good moments against professionals in the Mexican League. And that's the good and the bad of his situation. The bigger the sample size, the better clubs will know that they're going to get a good return on their investment. But with the World Cup on Mexican soil this coming summer, the bad is that his price tag will certainly be quite inflated from where it is now. A 15 million euro price tag is what has been floated, but his Brazilian agent Rafaela Pimenta, who does reportedly have a good relationship with Barça, said that number wouldn't even pay for one of his legs. And you can couple that with the inflated numbers that Mexican clubs ask for, and maybe 30 million might be closer to the target. Or maybe it's just posturing, and 20 million could get the deal done. And while other clubs probably wouldn't blink at those little differences of 5 and 10 million euros, those 10 million would definitely be the difference between Barcelona closing a deal and watching him go somewhere else. I did mention the other teams, but Real Madrid seems to be the biggest competitor for his signature so far, which has been the case before, as recently as Arda Güler, and we saw how that has worked out for Real Madrid. The funny thing about the big two in Spain is that history tells us nothing about which of the two would be leading the race for a Mexican talent. Both have had 4 players from Mexico in their history, with 1 big name, 2 contributors, and 1 cup of coffee. For Barça, it was Rafa Marquez as the big name, plus the Dos Santos brothers Giovanni and Jonathan, who came out of La Masia, and then most recently, Julian Araujo. For Madrid, it was Jose Ramon Sato back in the day for about 10 years. I want to say back in the day, I mean the 30s. Jose Boroya for the 1944 season, and then the big name Hugo Sanchez back in the 80s, one of the greatest poachers in football history, not just Mexican history. And finally, it was Javier Chicharito Hernandez. So if there is any pull for Barcelona, it would come from Rafa Marquez, who is currently serving as an assistant coach for the national team and could potentially help Gilberto Mora transition from the Mexican national team at the World Cup this summer into looking hard at Barcelona for next year. And as I promised, I was going to be talking more about the macro of Mexican football. So that kind of brings us into that conversation about the risk. And I say risk with those air quotes because, yes, any individual talent is their own individual story. But there has been great risk with any young Mexican talent over the last 10 years. Diego Lainez was the last Gilberto Mora, but a move to Real Betis didn't lead him to the European glory that Mexican fans wanted. He's now 25 and back in Mexico. Santiago Jimenez has somewhat come good on his promise, and he's doing his thing at AC Milan, so that is a good sign. Chucky Lozano, who spent 2 stints at PSV and 1 big one at Napoli, is back in the Americas with San Diego FC at the age of 30. This is where I want the Mexican fans to let me know in the comments if Chucky Lozano was good on his promise or he left a little bit wanting. Edson Alvarez was a really good player too at both Ajax and West Ham, but he's still only 27, and a loan to Fenerbahce might indicate that his time at the top might already be over. And taking a look at the generation before them, it's a lot of top-level role players in Europe, but arguably none that truly ascended to the level of the elite in the game, which truthfully is a really hard place to get to. That generation included Chicharito, Guillermo Ochoa, Andres Guardado, Hector Moreno, Carlos Vela, Hector Herrera, Raul Jimenez, and the Dos Santos brothers. So will Gilberto Mora be the Mexican star that all of those players won't? For this investment to make sense for Barcelona, he sure is going to need to be. Because internally, a transfer for Mora could potentially block the progress of all of Tony Fernandez, Dro Fernandez, Guille Fernandez, Kim Junet, Orion Gordon, and Ibrahima Tunkara. But like I made the argument with Pedri, there is a chance, because of what we've already seen from him in the professional ranks, that he could be better than all of those players. But for that price, it better be a guarantee that he's better than them. And that said, unlike all of those players I just mentioned, only Mora gives the club access to a Mexican audience looking for a big star that could potentially help them out in the marketing department. And what do I always say about 17-year-old players? You never know. Pedri and Gabi were supposed to be starting together in the Barcelona midfield at this point. Marc Pinol is supposed to be the successor to that pivot spot, but we don't know what will happen with his recovery from the ACL surgery. For Mora, he looks like a sure thing, and that's who you take a chance on. Sure things. The others don't have the top-level time yet to look like sure things. And that's the trust you put in Hansi Flick. Now, I would be surprised if it was Hansi Flick in the 2030 season, but hey, let's jump ahead to 2030 and say it's a 4-3-3 with Pedri and Moore as the interiors in front of Bernal. You also have Gabi rotating in. Then you get Tony Fernandez as a false winger, Dro as an interior or false winger, Guille as another option to play as a double pivot, and Ibrahima Tunkar will likely be farther forward as well. I believe that the versatility of a squad, especially a midfield, is the future of football. And you know what? As crazy as it sounds, if those players are all good enough, and maybe some of them gone out on loan and come back more refined products, then yeah, there will be room for all of them. Look at what Barcelona needs right now. With Dani Olmo injured, Ferran Torres struggling, Lewandowski is out for a month, Rafinha is injured, Fermin Lopez is coming back from injury, Lamine Yamal is coming back from injury. Yeah, right now it sounds like having that number of options in your midfield and along your wings isn't necessarily a bad idea. And as I said, if Barcelona is at the center of what I believe to be the future of football, which will largely be versatility both of your fullbacks and of your midfield, well, then all of those players will have the opportunity depending on what the situation is. The biggest obstacle for Gilberto Mora, other than him potentially choosing Real Madrid or the price tag, is the fact that Barcelona probably shouldn't be investing in another midfielder. They should probably be investing in other spots on the field for this summer to enhance their squad. That's the real argument. It is very likely this is the last year at Lewandowski in Catalonia, so obviously that will be a priority. And who replaces him will likely come down to how much Barca can spend. Julian Alvarez and Erling Haaland are the big fish, and Carl Ayang, who I already covered, and who also has a birthday today. He's turning 22. He's the cheaper option. For center back, which could be another priority, or is it a fullback? If it is center back, free agents could be Marc Guéhi, Dayot Upamecano, or Ibrahim Konate, while a left-footed center back like Nico Slaughterbeck is probably the biggest prize. The club is also reportedly tracking Tyler Tati, a 17-year-old left-footed center back at Nantes in Ligue 1, bringing up an argument about Andres Cuenca that we could rehash just like we did with Mora. So what do you think about Gilberto Mora? Of what you've seen of him, is he good enough to help Barcelona in the future? Is he going to be worth that investment? Should Barcelona just say no more midfielders no matter what? We have to trust what might be coming in the academy at the midfield position. You know, I'm really high on this generation, and I think Mora would just add to that. And it's always fun to have more and more toys in the toy chest if you're a coach like Hansi Flick, who seems to be pretty good at using young players and getting them up to snuff to help Barcelona win some stuff. If you want to help me win, and by win I just mean 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel, give a like, give a comment, and also help out if this is just in your ears on the podcast apps by giving a good little rating over there. I do appreciate reading the ones I've found, as well as getting these shows without the ads for as low as $3 on Patreon. And finally, please join me on Big Up on Saturday morning for that watch along against Girona. We'll be playing our very fun fantasy game where you pick 5 players and you put it together, and whoever gets it wins some big bucks that can help out your favorite creator on the platform. So with all that said, again, this was a little bit different than what we normally have, but if you want a more long-form conversation about the Barca first team and tactics and all that stuff, go listen to my show with the Purists last week. And without further ado, until next time, as always, Forza Barca.